What is going on, everybody? AHS Rules back again with another video as we're here once again for another Ring of Honor TV review, episode number 82 to be exact. Now, before we get into the TV review portion, we need to get through a couple of notes. The first of which is the first episode in about 2 months that has not taken place at the Esports Stadium in Arlington, Texas. So I do not know exactly where this episode was filmed at, but if I was to guesstimate, I would say from about 2 weeks ago, because there's still a banner hanging up promoting All Out, which was on September 6th. So that, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter, but I at least want to acknowledge it. The other thing, something that is a big deal and should be acknowledged, Athena is the longest reigning champion in Ring of Honor history at 649 plus days, surpassing Samoa Joe, which she did so last Saturday. So congratulations to Athena. We have covered a great majority of this women's world title run on the channel because she won it at Final Battle 2022, and I started doing the ROH reviews in about March of 2023. So we've been on board for this entirety of this title run. So congratulations to Athena. Now, my small issue here is that I kind of look dumb. The point I was making, I feel I'm still right on. Just the timing of it was terrible. But on this episode of ROH, unless it was like a throwaway line on commentary, there's not a special graphic made, Athena didn't appear, they did not really acknowledge us on this episode of ROH TV. Now, the point I was making was like, I thought they should have had a big time title defense take place. They've been teasing this Athena Abaddon match to happen at some point. And I thought for like one last test before the title reign is broken, or the streak is broken, I guess I should say, they should have had like a big time title defense. And I compared it to last year in AEW before MJF was the longest running AEW World Champion. He had a big time matchup with Kenny Omega. And they did not do that. And the reason I say the timing was bad is because I said this on last week's episode, and then literally the next day, the title reign happened, So, I feel my point is right. It was just bad timing. So, we'll see what they do of this next week. Hopefully, something happens, because this is something that is a big deal. I know several graphics were made and tweets were made about it on Twitter. Yes, I still call it Twitter. But on this episode, little to nothing. Now, speaking of this episode, our opening match was a Proving Ground match. Our main event was a Proving Ground match. We had one good tag team match in between. Everything else was squash matches. So let's get through this 82nd episode of Ring of Honor Wrestling on Honor Club. That first Proving Ground bout is Red Velvet versus Allison Kay. The biggest note I took away from this match is that Red Velvet now has a red strap for her women's television championship. Velvet ducked several clotheslines attempts but could not duck a big German suplex. Kay applies an ankle lock, and then Velvet applies a head scissors that Kay tries to turn into a tombstone, but a great majority of this match is just Red Velvet reversing Allison Kay's maneuver attempts, and this includes Velvet reversing Kay to hit a running Meteora and a cutter to win the bout. The next matchup is the Gates of Agony versus Dante Leon and Trip Jordy. Jordy and Khan start the match off with Khan landing massive chops. Then the Gates land a big double team powerbomb. This leads to Leon tagging in just to catch a headbutt and a suplex, and then loses to the Gates of Agony when they hit the Gates of Agony. Now, before we get to the next match, I sometimes like to mention the commercials that happen on these episodes. This was a new commercial promoting AEW Wrestle Dream. I believe it was October 12th, but I'm not 100% sure with that. But this commercial might be a bit of a spoiler alert for Grand Slam this next week. And it was like Bryan Danielson having a dream, celebrating at All In, winning the World Championship, and then he wakes up from the dream to reality, and it showed Jon Moxley attacking him at All Out. So, no mention of Danielson and Darby, no mention of Danielson and McGuinness that's scheduled to take place. It kind of makes it seem like they're leaning heavy into Moxley and Danielson at Wrestle Dream. So, we'll see what happens with that. But they probably should have waited a week for that commercial to air, but it is what it is. Next matchup is Brandon Cutler versus Preston Vance. Vance dominates after the Code of Honor because Cutler was trying to bait him into it because he's like, Vance, you can't attack me until after the Code of Honor. And then they do it, and he still attacks him. Anyways, they take the action to the outside, but back in the ring, Cutler reverses a lariat attempt into a crossbody, just to be caught with a lariat later on that leads to Vance's victory. We get a backstage promo from the Outrunners who call out the Iron Savages for their attack last week and essentially say that they want them at any time and any place. So we'll see what happens with that. John Silver takes on KM Matt next. I almost said KM match. KM next. The match starts with a pose off between the two that the commentary team mentioned that like both of these guys are bad guys, but because KM is such a bad guy, they cheer John Silver more. This is a power of strength throughout the match that Silver ends up winning with a helicopter drop. As now, we get a patch. Okay. This is going to be some breaking news. Let's see what this news is, to be exact. It's going to distract me. Joel Embiid signs a contract extension with the Sixers, which is somewhat ROH news because he's Philly. ROH was born in Philly. That doesn't matter. I try to stress that. Regardless, Josh Woods and Mark Sterling purchase television time, putting over the reverse Alabama Slam that Josh Woods won a match with several weeks ago. And the main thing that they said is that over 2 million people saw this move happen. On what? I have no clue. If it was on Honor Club, that is impressive, but I doubt it. So there, he was putting that over and essentially said that he can do that to anyone at any time. Such an interesting... I would have saved my money. I guess they got the money to do it, but I wouldn't have went out of my way to do this. But it is what it is. Next, we get Rachel Ellering versus Maggie Lee. Ellering does the Code of Honor with the referee because Lee does not want any part of the Code of Honor. The match has lots of slams by Ellering, including a Boss Woman slam to win the match. And after the match, there's still no Code of Honor. So I want all the competitors to do the Code of Honor, but at least Maggie Lee stuck with her guns. Next, we get the history of the Workhorsemen / Beef. And essentially it shows JD Drake being injured and taking time off now. And then it leads to us being introduced to Beef, who is Anthony Henry's second cousin by marriage. So there's your dose of Anthony Henry and Beef for the week. As our next matchup is a tag team matchup, the Infantry versus Angelico and Serpentico. Bravo and Angelico start the match off with a collar and elbow tie-up, but we get lots of dancing between these two until their tag partners tag in. Serpentico lands awkwardly after a double hip toss by the Infantry. Angelico steps up to stop a boot camp attempt from happening, but does not stop a second one from happening that leads to the Infantry winning this matchup. Next match is Anthony Ogogo versus Kit Sackett. Sackett tried to take Ogogo down early on, but Ogogo lands several forearms and elbows to stop this from happening and wins with a pop-up forearm that causes a KO. Later on in the episode, I did not write this down, but I at least remember that it happened. Ogogo is talking about how he is trying to build up a case to get a championship match in ROH, and that Shane Taylor Promotions wants to run ROH, and Shane Taylor's like, we're going to get the power, and we're going to get them. First you get the power, then you get the money. So we'll see what happens with Shane Taylor Promotions. As now we go to another faction in ROH, the Cage of Agony. We already saw the Gates of Agony of this trio compete earlier. Now Brian Cage competes against Dion Russman. The Wolverine gear is back on by Brian Cage. Lots of clotheslines by Cage. Russman escapes a drill claw attempt to land a rock bottom for a 2 count. Russman misses a frog splash, then Cage hits a lariat and a power bomb and wins via a clover leaf. This is not the last that we see of Brian Cage on this episode. As our main event, a proven ground bout, Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara versus the Dark Order's Alex Reynolds and Evil Uno. Earlier in the episode, we get a reason why these two teams are competing. Essentially, Dustin Rhodes is happy to have championships again, and he did that by being in Ring of Honor. And the Dark Order are very upset because they've been competing in Ring of Honor for the past year plus, and Dustin Rhodes literally just came in and got championship opportunities, and they feel disrespected by this. But this is a proving ground bout, and the good thing that the Dark Order did in this is they did not have to win. They just have to last the 10-minute time limit. So Silver and Sammy start the match off, but the Dark Order members, Reynolds and Evil Uno, just run around the ring and try to get this match to go to the time limit draw. And then Sammy and Dustin catch on to this and bait their opponents to come into the ring after taunting them, which actually happens. Once the actual action takes place, the Dark Order double team on Dustin Rhodes. Evil Uno hits a pile driver for a 2 count. Sammy then is able to tag in and land a super kick and a cutter. Rhodes hits Reynolds with a Canadian Destroyer, followed up by a suplex, and Sammy hits a swanton to win the match. Now, Eric Abani calls this a swan dive, which I thought was specific to Billy Starks because they're both swantons. I appreciate Jeff Hardy. I'm going to call it, besides when Billy Starks hits it, I'm calling it a swanton. But Sammy Guevara wins the match off of a swanton. Quickly after the match ends, Brian Cage and the Gates of Agony come out and attack Dustin Rhodes and Sammy Guevara. And this still goes on even at the very end, conclusion, little graphic comes up saying the episode is over. So we'll see what happens with that. So a somewhat quick episode of ROH. We got a lot covered here. I just hope next week's episode is good. You know, I say that at the end of like almost every review, but it is what it is. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. You like and subscribe. You enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. And I'll see you in the next video because I'm out.